Hello everyone, thank you for clicking on my channel. Welcome to the journey home. My name is Catherine and I live in Nova Scotia. This is a caption from a book called One Spirit Medicine by Alberto Villaldo, who is a PhD, trained as a psychologist, medical anthropologist, studied the healing practices of the Amazon and the Andean shamans. This chapter is called The Journey to the Divine Feminine, Facing the Fear of Death and Meeting the Goddess. Taken from the Gospel of Pseudo Matthew. Now on a certain day, while Mary stood near the fountain to fill her pitcher, the angel of the Lord appeared unto her, saying, Blessed art thou, Mary, for in thy womb thou hast prepared a habitation for the Lord. Behold, light from heaven shall come and dwell in thee, and through thee shall shine in all of the world. The Divine Mother, the symbol of the feminine, is found in all cultures, manifesting as the Madonna or Kali or Kuan Yin, even as wisdom itself, the mother of all Buddhas. The shaman seeks to meet the Divine Feminine in her own domain, the rich, dark inner world that we journey to when we face our fear of death. This journey is associated with the west direction on the medicine wheel, the place of the dying sun. When we meet the Divine Feminine in the ordinary world, we are smitten. A man sees the goddess in the woman he falls in love with, until she begins to make his life impossible. When women meet the Divine Feminine in the world, they often idolize or envy her, instead of recognizing her beauty and power within themselves. The Greek tale of the athlete Actaeon and Diana, goddess of the hunt and the moon, illustrates what can happen when we unexpectedly encounter the Divine Feminine. During a hunt with his hounds and his males, Actaeon left his companions resting and wandered off to explore part of the forest he had never seen. He came upon a valley thick with pines and cypress and a pristine stream that followed into a shallow pool. There, to his surprise and delight, was the beautiful Diana, standing naked as her nymphs bathed her. The goddess had left her spear and bow and quiver of arrows on the riverbank beside her sandals and robe. When the nymphs saw Actaeon, they quickly rushed to cover Diana with their own naked bodies, trying to hide the divine form from the young mortal's lustful gaze. But the goddess towered above her nymphs, and she stood proud, revealing her full body to the hunter. Splashing water in his face, she told him, Now you can say you have seen Diana naked. With that, antlers suddenly sprang from Actaeon's head. His muscular neck grew longer and sprouted fur. His arms turned into legs and his hands into hooves. Stunned, he bounded away, astonished at how quickly he could run. But when he stopped breathless by a pool and stooped to drink, he caught his reflection in the water and saw that he had become a stag. At that instant he heard his own dogs baying and barking, hot on his trail. Terrified, he fled, but the dogs were soon at his heels, the first of them tearing at his flank. Actaeon tried calling their names, but only a strange guttural sound came out of his mouth. In an instant the dogs felled him, ripping open his underbelly and tearing out his organs as he bled to death, and turning the lustful Actaeon into a stag, the symbol of male virility and power. The goddess transforms him into man's wildest fantasy, the all-fertile stud, the human horned god. In ancient Paleolithic art, shamans were portrayed as horned beings, like the sorcerer in the famed cave painting at Trois Frères in Aries, France. Even today, we refer to all male gatherings as stag parties. Meanwhile, the goddess is portrayed as granting all wishes, even our deepest, most unconscious ones, which, if we're not careful, may also contain the elements of our demise. Meeting the jaguar. The sun sets in the west, bringing forth the cacophony of night in the jungle. In the darkness, a sleek black cat moves silently. For the shaman, The jaguar is a potent symbol of the divine feminine. With no predators in the rainforest, the jaguar lives free of fear, taking just what it needs from the jungle for nourishment and no more. It doesn't kill out of greed or for sport or out of concern that the food supply will dry up. It doesn't scramble to be more, do more, or accomplish more. It doesn't need to prove itself. The jaguar hunts, explores, and sleeps as required, living a secure and balanced life. To indigenous peoples in the southwestern United States, the Mexican jungles, and the Andean highlands, the jaguar represents the healing power of one's spirit medicine in much the same way that the caduceus, the staff with two intertwined serpents crowned by eagle wings, symbolizes the healing to Western physicians. In fact, the earliest civilization in the Americas, that of the Olmec of Mexico, was so fascinated with the jaguar that this great feline is depicted in much of the Olmec art, including many figures that are half human, half jaguar. For the Maya, the jaguar is a symbol of death and acceptance of death's role in the cycle of life. Before the Spanish conquest, the Mayan high priests were called Balams. Balam is Maya for jaguar, indicating they had traveled through the domains beyond the death. They had made the symbolic journey to the underworld, conquered their fear of death, and returned with the elixir of immortality. In our journey to the divine feminine, we embody the wisdom of the jaguar, letting go of our fear of the unknown and trusting that what is dying inside us needs to be renewed in order to serve all life. With the cycle of life and death, harmony is reestablished. All species flourish as part of the balance of nature. For us, the promise of the jaguar is to feel at home and safe regardless of any danger that surrounds us, and to live free of chronic disease. Doing the work of the jaguar, we discover that life provides us with everything we need. Jaguar gives us the confidence to step out boldly and explore. Sure that we're headed where we need to go, and that we're moving in sync with our life's purpose. Jaguar energy brings us into balance and sanity, even if the world around us has gone mad, or we're paralyzed with fear and confusion, or we're faced with the prospect of debilitating disease. Jaguar returns our power and confidence and restores our health. And if you allow Jaguar to guide you far enough, she will lead you to the realm of the goddess to receive her wisdom directly. If we complete this step on the medicine wheel, meeting the goddess and facing the fear of death, we can become like the jaguar, living with creativity and grace, and experiencing wellness and balance. We can even hope to defeat death, like the ancient Mayan wisdom keepers, and discover our eternal nature. To understand this concept of defeating death, we need to consider the philosophy of the ancient Americans. They believed, as many people still do, that we have an essence that continues beyond death. But contrary to our Western religious thinking, in which the eternal nature of the soul is assumed, the shamans of old held that immortality is merely a seed, a potential that we all possess, but one we have to awaken and empower to ensure the continuity of our consciousness beyond death. Our entire life, therefore, must be dedicated to spiritual practice so that we can learn how to leave this life behind. As the Amazon shamans say, the Maya called this process the awakening of your jaguar body, and the Balams, the priests who had mastered it, were their prophecy keepers. The Tibetan Buddhist equivalent of the jaguar body is the light body. One effect of completing the work of the medicine wheel is to germinate the seeds of immortality that you carry inside of you. Discovering your mortality. Do you remember the first time you thought about your own death? The first time you faced the fact that you will die? In adolescence, we feel impervious to death, believing it's something that happens to others but will never happen to us. And so after one too many beers, we drive down winding mountain roads with a car full of friends, denying that the laws of physics apply to us as we careen around the curves. without giving safety a second thought. And then one day we lose a loved one, or have an accident, or a health scare, and we face the fact that death has always been by our side. Actually, we have two great awakenings about mortality. The first is the one that occurs when we grasp that we're temporal beings, and that one day our time on earth will end. If we take this awareness to heart from that moment on, we know that every moment is precious, and our lives are changed forever. The second great awakening happens when we master our fear of death. This is the understanding that our nature is trans-temporal, outside of time, and undying and continuing for all eternity. Our understanding of our eternal nature cannot be merely an intellectual one. It must be a visceral awareness, a knowing at a cellular level. In many pre-agricultural societies, there is a rite of initiation to foster this awareness, a symbolic encounter with death in which the initiate experiences the seamless continuity of life beyond physical existence. Whether or not you consciously invite death in a rite of initiation, mastering the fear of death is immensely liberating, freeing you to use your creative faculties, to find harmony in the chaos of everyday existence. The cacophony of the jungle becomes music. A tragedy becomes the foundation of a new and more fulfilling way of life. You start to envision the more enriching life for yourself and a more sustainable future for your community. You are called to serve the earth and all living beings as you realize that we will continue together for eons to come. After you've done the work of the jaguar, the new stories you write for yourself will be empowering and invigorating, extending beyond mere concern of your immediate needs. But be warned, if you try to rush the process by pushing aside your fear of death without acknowledging it, or scrambling to figure your way out of danger as quickly as possible, the initiation will be incomplete. The close brush with death will seem like a lucky break, not an invitation to discover your undying nature. The problems you thought you had left behind will in all likelihood return as you slip into fear-based behaviors of the past. When the challenge of the jaguar remains unmet, life again becomes overwhelming, with no time left for the really important things. To master fear, we need to return to its rightful role as nature's early warning system, not as an habitual state of being. Fear alerts us to possible danger in our surroundings, making us ready to respond appropriately. But when fear settles into the nervous system, instead of passing through it, we become possessed by it. The HPA axis goes into hyperdrive. Life turns chaotic at every level. From the standpoint of biology, health is determined by the degree of harmony and complexity in the body. Nature favors complexity. The human being evolved from a single-celled organism into a highly specialized creature, but complexity alone is not enough to create health. The system must be coherent and harmonious as well. 100 people playing 100 different musical instruments do not make an orchestra. To create music, these instruments have to play in harmony. The more complex and coherent the systems in your body, the healthier you will be. Heart rate variability, naturally occurring fluctuations in the rhythm of the heartbeat, is one measure of our overall health. The more variable your heart rate, the healthier your heart, and the more harmoniously all the systems in your body work together, the greater your resilience and health. This understanding of coherence and complexity is reflected even in health at the cellular level. Orderly cells create health, while disorderly cells revert back to a primitive state and begin to form tumors. Chaotic cells steal nourishment from the body, and unlike healthy cells, refuse to die. They defy the instructions of the mitochondria, the structures in the cells that control the cell's death clock, to die off so that younger, more vital cells can replace them. When cells lose their complexity, they can no longer feed on healthy fats, but only on sugars, which is why eliminating all sugars and carbohydrates from your diet is so important. for healing from cancer and other diseases. As cancerous cells multiply in the body, we wreak havoc, ultimately killing the host that is feeding them. And what happens at a cellular level is reflected in what happens into your life if you refuse to accept endings as a natural part of life. When fear of death takes over, it determines what your experiences will be, eventually sucking the life out of you. Endings, transitions, and beginnings. We have to let ourselves be terrified by the transition that death of the old ushers in. Fear of death, whether death of the body, a way of thinking, a relationship, a situation, or a dream, has to be experienced fully and consciously, and then overcome for new healthy growth to take place. At just 12 years old, Annie was one of the youngest cancer patients I had ever worked with. Her parents had brought her to see me in the hopes that one spirit medicine would reverse her brain cancer. They had tried every conceivable medical intervention to no avail, and were looking to me for the cure they had failed to find anywhere else. Annie had lost all of her hair from chemotherapy and looked like a young, smiling Buddha as she sat in a big leather chair in my office. I explained to Annie's parents the difference between healing and curing. While curing is the elimination of symptoms, healing works at a much deeper level, treating the causes of the imbalance that lead to disease. And while a cure is the ideal outcome of a medical intervention, healing is the product of a journey in which all aspects of your life are transformed. Even if you end up dying, you carry your healed self into your next life. I asked Annie's parents to sit outside in the waiting room so I could be alone with her, and after a few moments of small talk, she told me bluntly, "I'm not afraid." She went on to say that angels came to her every night in her dreams, and even during the day at times, but her parents were deathly afraid for her. "I can't tell them about the angels," Annie said, but she thought I would understand, and I did. I sensed that the veils between the worlds were parting for Annie, and that her spirit was preparing for the great journey home. But her parents were understandably determined to do everything possible to help Annie live, and this meant trying to get rid of her cancer by taking her to a string of specialists, and finally, as a last resort, to me. I've been a practicing shaman long enough to understand that death is part of life, and I have seen that some of my most successful healings consisted of helping my clients die peacefully and consciously. So I performed an illumination on Annie to help bring balance to her energy field and thus to her body. The illumination is the core healing practice of shamanic energy medicine, in which the luminous energy field is cleared of the imprints of disease to help mobilize the body's own healing systems. Annie's doctors had not given her long to live, but I know that death is a doorway to continued life in the world of spirit. I worked on Annie's chakras, clearing them of the heavy energies that had accumulated in them, helping to lighten their energetic load for the great journey ahead of her. As she lay on my treatment table, she went into a deep sleep, although her body twitched as she released energies bound up in her chakras. At the end of our session, Annie returned to the leather chair. That almost seemed to swallow her, the smile on her face. "Am I going to be okay?" she asked me, and we both knew that what she was talking about. I had sensed the angels in the room as I did the illumination. "Yes," I said. "You're going to be just fine." And then she asked me how she could help her mother and father. "They're really afraid," she said. I'm always stunned by the wisdom of so many children, and equally stunned by the lack of wisdom in so many adults. When Annie's parents came back into the room, they found us both smiling. I told them what great work their daughter had done. I suggested they eliminate all gluten from Annie's diet, as well as sugar, dairy, and all possible allergens. Then I recommended that she take omega-3 fatty acids daily to help rebuild the regions in the brain that had been damaged by chemo. At no time is it more important to have your brain whole than when you are coming to the end of your life. The neural apparatus has to be in the best working order possible for you to pass consciously into the world of spirit. I learned that Annie passed away a few months later with a smile on her face in the arms of her angels. Love and letting go. The forest undergrowth and canopy can't grow unless the soil is replenished by the decaying bodies of dead plants. Even the jaguar will die, feeding the tree that will feed the monkey that the next jaguar will feast on. The balance of life in the forest wouldn't be possible without death, just as we can't live in a state of harmony with our environment unless endings are a part of our lives. Things have to die for new things to be born. Death and life are always in balance. The work of the jaguar helps us find a balance between, on the one hand, engaging life aggressively and seizing opportunity at all costs, and on the other hand, approaching life with acceptance and receptivity so we can surrender to the larger creative process. It's a delicate dance between masculine, aggressive energy and feminine, receptive energy. The jaguar teaches us that we can stop hoarding, stop taking more than we need, because Mother Earth will provide us with plenty. We can trust that what lies ahead around a blind corner may actually be better than what we see now. The work of the jaguar allows us to stop grasping at the past and start living more optimistically and imaginatively. Then, instead of worrying about the sun setting, we can enjoy the evening stars and look forward to the sun rising again at just the right time. The obsession with losing what we have, our youth, our belongings, our loved ones, our health, begins to fade. Our relationship with death becomes a healthy one. Entropy is the law of physics that says that everything in the universe is moving toward chaos and disorder, toward breakdown and death. Temporary disorder and disorientation are necessary preludes to reorganization at a higher level. This is what we experience when we begin a new relationship, a new career, or a new health plan. Change holds danger, but also the potential for something new and better to be born. In the West, on the medicine wheel, we come to terms with the cycle of destruction and rebirth, the natural order of the universe. We grasp at a deep level that creative chaos can lead to greater harmony and balance. In Hinduism, the cycle of destruction and rebirth is represented by the Trimurti. The three principal deities controlling the cosmos. Trimurti. Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer. Once we face our fear and experience the sense of loss and despair in every bone in our body, no longer denying it or running away from it, the fear dissipates. Then we can immerse ourselves in the chaos of creation, the primordial soup from which new life arises. There is no dipping a toe in the pool cautiously. Total immersion is the only way to experience full initiation into a new stage of being and perceiving. Allowing ourselves to be truly terrified by the unknown, we can let go of the safety of the shore and plunge into unfamiliar waters, aware of the risks but excited by the possibilities. Many of us hesitate to surrender fully to loving another being because we fear losing the loved one. In my late 20s, after suffering what I called chronic heartbreak, I vowed never again to be involved in a deeply committed love relationship. The pain of losing the person I was so deeply attached to was too great to bear. And then after a couple of emotionally barren years, I realized how futile my vow was. Love can't be guaranteed. One day, after reading a poem of Rumi's, I decided to face my fear. Rumi said to his beloved, "For I have ceased to exist. Only you are here." This was the complete opposite of what I had sought in all my earlier relationships. My mantra then was, "For you have ceased to exist. Only I am here." Gradually, I began to understand, as Rumi did, that in reality, all love is. At bottom, a longing for spirit, for the true beloved, and that my deepest fear was not for losing my partner, but of never finding myself. Return from the underworld. Overcoming the fear that holds us back from a new dream is a universal theme in mythology. Understanding mythic journeys of death and rebirth can help us with the work of the jaguar. In Greek mythology, the underworld was a complex place filled with malevolent spirits, rivers with magical powers, and a queen who ruled the shadowy realm and knew its secrets. Among the mortals who, according to legend, entered the underworld alive and emerged unscathed was Hercules, who had the strength to overpower the three-headed guard dog Cerberus. Courage and strength allowed Hercules to survive what seemed like a fatal mission. It takes courage to stay with fear and breathe into the emotion rather than run away from it or try to subdue it. But when courage becomes bravado, it can be our undoing, as it was for the musician Orpheus. After his wife Eurydice died and was whisked away to Hades, Orpheus descended to the underworld in pursuit. There, with his sweet music, he persuaded King Hades and Queen Persephone to allow Eurydice to return to the land of the living. But just as they reached the threshold, Orpheus, disobeying Hades, glanced back at his beloved. With that, she was banished to the shadowy realm forever. Orpheus survived, but his love was forever lost. Psyche and her journey to the underworld. To meet the healing power of the divine feminine, we can look to another mortal, Psyche, who descended into the underworld and survived. Psyche is the Greek word for soul, and her story describes the journey that every male or female must take if they seek to defeat death and be initiated by love. The youngest and loveliest daughter of a king, Psyche was so beloved by everyone that Aphrodite, goddess of love, became jealous and drove all of Psyche's suitors away. The king consulted an oracle who told him that he must chain his daughter to a rock to be courted by and married to death. A horrible monster. The myth tells us that the young innocent part of ourselves, full of fresh ideas and the changes they bring, threatens the old ways. Psyche's challenge was to face death, and she did, but not in the way she thought she would. Aphrodite sent her son Eros to shoot an arrow of love into Psyche so that the maiden would be irresistibly attracted to death. But just as Eros was about to carry out his mother's wishes, he became so distracted by Psyche's beauty that he pricked himself with his own arrows and fell in love with her himself. He swept Psyche away to his home in the mountains, defying the threats of his mother, who believed that Psyche's beauty and vitality must be destroyed. As the myth points out, this is precisely what fear of death and loss can do: destroy our beauty and vitality. Eros was kind and loving to Psyche, with one caveat: she was never to look at him. Not wanting to reveal he was a god, he came to her only after dark. Psyche agreed to the conditions and delighted in her unseen husband. But when her sisters came to visit, envious of Psyche's good fortune, they persuaded her to disobey her husband's orders. What if he's a monster, they asked. Psyche hadn't been afraid of the unknown before, but after her sister's warning, fear got the better of her. She went to sleep with a plan, and after making love to her husband, quickly lit a lamp so she could see his face and form. She discovered the beautiful Eros sleeping sweetly and was overjoyed to see he wasn't a monster at all. But then a drop of hot oil from the lamp fell on Eros's shoulder, and he woke up. Furious that Psyche had disobeyed him, he flew away. In giving in to her own fear amid social pressure from her sisters, she destroyed her happy life. Psyche entreated the gods for help, but they all feared Aphrodite. In fact, gods are no help in a situation like this, for they are bound to tradition and the old ways. The gods told the devastated Psyche that the only way she could right the situation was to get into Aphrodite's good graces. Though terrified, Psyche took their advice and bravely approached her mother-in-law. She was ready for the work of the West, confronting and overcoming her fears. Aphrodite, however, was furious that Psyche had dared to approach her. The goddess took the young woman by the hair and smashed her head against the ground. She then assigned Psyche 4 impossible tasks she had to complete if she wanted her husband back. The first was to sort out a huge pile of seeds before nightfall. If Psyche failed, she would die. This task represents our fear of time running out. How will we have time to accomplish everything in our lives? How can we sort what's important from what isn't? Will we have enough time for the things that really matter to us? With the help of a colony of ants, Psyche managed to complete the task. The ants represent the assistance that is always available to us if we look. None of us can do the seemingly impossible alone. Psyche's second task was to cross a river and retrieve the fleece from the fierce magical rams grazing in a field. The rams represent our fear of adversaries, more powerful than we are. We all have to face these adversaries, in the form of bosses and family and other obligations in life. Once again, Psyche completed the task with help. The reeds growing on the riverbank told her to wait until dusk, when the rams fell asleep. Then she could collect the fleece that had stuck to the reeds when the rams rubbed against them, without risking discovery by the sheep. By allowing the situation to resolve itself, Psyche freed herself from the need to take on an enemy who would easily overpower her. The third task was to fill a crystal goblet with water from the source of the river Styx, a sacred spring high on the mountain that was protected by sleepless dragons. This was an impossible task for a mortal. Even the gods would be leery of such an assignment. In the course of our lives, we all face seemingly impossible tasks, and when we fear we're not smart enough, good enough, strong enough, or brave enough to handle them, we're like Psyche, facing the unattainable. She despaired until an eagle appeared, took the goblet in its talons, flew up to the mountaintop, filled the goblet with water from the sacred spring, and brought it back to her, helping her accomplish the superhuman task. The eagle soaring high in the sky represents the overarching vision, the attention to the big picture that is necessary to overcome our fears, coupled with the daring to go where ordinary birds would never fly. In the same way, the promise of one spirit medicine can help us overcome our fear of facing uncertainty and aiming high as we undergo the process of initiation. Like the ants and reeds, the eagle represents the helpful forces the universe provides, the synchronous events that occur in our lives when we have the courage to take risks despite our fear. Psyche's fourth task was to descend into the underworld and ask Persephone for some of her precious beauty cream to give Aphrodite. Frightened beyond words, Psyche decided to take her own life, a guaranteed one-way ticket to the realm of the dead. She climbed an abandoned stone tower and was just about to jump when the tower told her where to find the entrance to the underworld, advising her to carry 2 coins and 2 barley cakes with her, and to neither accept assistance from any shades she met in the underworld, nor give any assistance to anyone who asked her for it. This is the most valuable advice anyone can give us on a journey to conquer fear. We must bring gifts, our abilities and strengths and qualities like generosity and compassion, and we must be careful who we ask to help us. Even friends who have our best interests at heart often can't or won't provide the assistance or advice we need. Although tempted to help the shades who cried out to her, Psyche followed the orders and ignored their pleas. She paid Charon, the ferryman, fed the guard dog, Cerberus, and accepted only a snack, not a banquet, from Persephone. At last, she successfully retrieved the jar of beauty cream for Aphrodite. Despite her natural urge to help others, Psyche stayed on task, just as we have to focus on our own initiation and not allow ourselves to be diverted by other people's needs as a way of avoiding the inner work that we must do. Psyche was on the verge of successfully completing her tasks when, like Orpheus, she gave in to temptation. She peeked inside the jar she was carrying and instantly fell asleep. In her impatience, she tried to rush the process of initiation, and as a result slipped back into an unawakened state. Her folly serves as a cautionary tale as we complete the lessons of the jaguar. In older versions of the myth, Psyche returned to the world with the beauty cream intact, but the gods became jealous and took it away, then granted her immortality to keep her from sharing the secret of eternal youth with other humans. In another version, however, all was not lost. Psyche was rescued by Eros, the force of romantic and sexual love, which has the power to restore life. As for Aphrodite, she had known all along that Psyche would open the jar, which contained not beauty cream, but the elixir of immortality. Psyche's deep sleep represents the death of her old, limited sense of self. Then when she awakened, she was granted immortality by Zeus. For us, what is most significant about Psyche's tale of her initiation in the underworld, she has to face her fear of death so she can transform her life. All initiation involves a journey to the realm of death and a meeting with the divine feminine, from which you return renewed. This isn't like the superficial change that comes from making minor tweaks in your life. The journey to the divine feminine, like Parsifal's quest for the Grail, is demanding. You have to endure the fear of going to the underworld and remaining there in deep reflection before you can emerge to light and clarity. If you think what you bring back is just a salve for your wounds, you miss the point. The cream isn't ordinary wrinkle cream, or a souvenir on par with a t-shirt or tote bag printed with the slogan, "I went to Hades and back." The beauty cream brings rejuvenation and reinvention. The elixir of immortality is the prize for completing the work of the West. There is no rushing the journey of initiation. Mastering the fear of death is a lifelong process. You may be challenged and tested many times, although with each time, the way becomes easier. Once you have reclaimed the ability to reinvent yourself, you're ready for the next direction on the medicine wheel, the north. There you will learn to become still so you can retrieve lost aspects of your soul. Meditate with the jaguar. Jaguars are masters of meditation. Have you ever watched a cat lounging in the sun? Cats know perfect relaxation. A jaguar in the rainforest perches on the lower branches of a tree and watches the world go by, undisturbed by the monkeys and the macaws, completely at ease, yet totally alert, with only the tip of its tail twitching now and then. The jaguar teaches us how to relax, deeply relax. Try explaining to your cat that there are important things to worry about. Today we understand that much of the imbalance in our bodies is caused by our inability to slow down and release tension. Our sympathetic nervous system is designed to provide us with the reflexes to fight or flee when we're in danger. And when the system is switched on, we can't relax for even a few seconds. Cortisol and adrenaline flood the bloodstream to give us a burst of energy to deal with threats. But these powerful chemicals are not meant to course through the body for more than a short time. If we're truly in danger, we fight or flee and then quickly recover as the adrenaline and cortisol are reabsorbed into the body system and our breathing slows to normal. But when we're chronically on high alert, paralyzed with anxiety, toxic levels of cortisol remain in the body, causing inflammation and neuron damage, and ultimately disease. Instead of mastering our fear of death masters us. Our jaguar has climbed to the uppermost branches of the tree like a terrified kitten, and we're powerless to call the fire department to bring it down. All of us will die someday. However, we don't have to experience the slide to death prematurely. We can master our fear of death so that our lives are not dictated by dread, and we are not constantly responding as if a jungle beast were poised to pounce on us at any time. We can return to a balanced, calm, relaxed state, switching on our parasympathetic nervous system so the pineal gland can produce the spirit molecules and be graceful jaguars, savoring our newly discovered visceral wisdom about the infinite nature of life. And so ends the chapter. The next one will be the journey of the sage. Thanks for joining me, everyone. God bless you, and we'll talk again soon. Bye for now.